Hello everyone, my name is Alice. I'm from the Ohio State University. Today, Ali and I will give you an update of MSI Marketing Mix Model Initiative. So I will speak in the first 10 minutes, basically talking about the background, definition, context, and then Ali will take it to the next phase of our initiative, and any of your feedback will be really appreciated here. So I will begin by talking about just what is marketing mix model. So sorry, professors, I'm going to hold you listen to me talk about marketing 4Ps and marketing mix model for the next few minutes. If you are not very familiar with marketing mix model, it was introduced back in 1950s along with 4Ps of marketing. And these 4Ps are price, product, place, and promotion. And all of these 4Ps are very important components in any marketing strategy. So when we talk about marketing mix models, it helps us determine how much impact is driven by each of these marketing 4Ps and to forecast the future impact of changing or optimizing these 4Ps. And the dependent variable we typically use is sales, but we can also extend this model to look at profit ROI or customer lifetime value. And we know Coca-Cola also uses it to measure the new customer acquisition. So it's a very flexible framework. My bad. Is it moving forward? Okay.
Yep, you got it.
So here again, back to the marketing mix model. On the left-hand side, you can see all the input variables. So these are the 4Ps together with external conditions. And these variables can be correlated with one another. And on the right-hand side, it could be sales, and as I mentioned, it could be other variables Brent shares about. And marketing mix model will help companies to understand all these 4Ps and external conditions and try to make a good forecast for the company. So I know some of you, when you think about MMM, you think about medium mix model. So I want to also take a minute to explain what's the difference between these, because the focus of our initiative is on marketing mix model. So here is a table from Dr. McKenzie and Quinn Powell's paper published in 2016 on Journal Marketing. All of these numbers in this table are elasticities. So elasticities are the responsiveness of demand or sales to a change in each of these variables. If you think about the numbers in the table, we take the first one as an example. If the price elasticity of demand is negative 2.6, it means 1% increase in price leads to a 2.6% decrease in demand or sales. And when we talk about elasticities, we consider them either elastic or inelastic. When the absolute value is greater than 1, we say it's elastic. And when the absolute value is less than 1, we consider it inelastic. So we can take salt and sugar as an example. So sugar can be elastic. When the price drops, we can buy more. And we make sugar cookies, brownie, or maybe there's a General Tso's chicken with a lot of sugar. But salt is inelastic in that sense. Even there is a buy one get one free promotion, we are unlikely to double our consumption of salt. So now I want to bring our attention to some of the numbers here. We can see price and price promotion are very elastic because their absolute values are greater than 1 in the short term. When it comes to the long run, it becomes 0. And the other numbers like personal selling and advertising, they are inelastic. But what we care under medium mix model, advertising has an elasticity that's 0.1. And it could be even lower for some established products. So that's the elasticity. And then after I introduced about the market mix model, and I also mentioned it was first introduced back in 1950s, you might wonder, why do we need a new initiative on market mix model in 2023? And the primary reason, as mentioned by several colleagues from academics, is privacy regulations recently introduced. And as a response to that, some of the leading browsers decided to phase out third-party cookies, and other platforms decided to use walled gardens. And without such granular data at the cookie level, we probably find it very difficult to do any multi-touch attribution as we could do before. And then the companies will find it difficult to understand or measure the individual marketing channels' contribution to their conversions or the platform performance. And what works well with cookie level data right now may not be as effective in the future when third-party cookies disappear altogether. So as some solutions, some companies say we can focus more on first-party cookie data, right? First-party data, like in the morning, Vanguard is very fortunate, and the Taobao started by Shell is also very fortunate. They have a lot of first-party data. But sometimes when they don't have it, they come up with different solutions or products. For example, here I just quote one example from Adobe. They suggest to use AI from bottom up to augment the customer level data. And then from top down, they want to use marketing mix model to do the overall planning, forecasting, and optimization. Some other companies suggested to integrate marketing mix model with software as a service or MarTech, or supplemented with field experiments. And also, we look at the inputs and outputs of marketing mix model. On the input side, instead of using some numeric values, the 4Ps and environment, some external factors, we can also look at some non-numerical values, like customers' attitude, or some unstructured textual data, or even the image studied by artists and music, and a lot of more elements can be studied as an input variable for marketing mix model. On the output side, in addition to sales, we can also look at the different stages of customers' purchase journey. And because of a lot of vendors are constantly innovating, providing new solutions and products to this field, so some industry partners started to questioning about the effectiveness of these solutions, and also the reliability and the validity of the insights they can learn from all these different alternative solutions. So what they care is, what's the best practice of marketing mix model right now? And if the solution can help them to make the most effective decision about their marketing spend, and is the solution robust when they move from one product to another, from one category to another, or just across industries? And they also want it to be very granular and timely. So this is where MSI comes into this very unique position to set the industry standard in the development of this refreshed version of marketing mix model. So the goal of our initiative is to develop and disseminate the best practice for the design and validation use of marketing mix model to increase the trust and ensure marketing spend is as effective as possible. And like John mentioned in the morning, we want to create this premier industry and academic think tank to just facilitate the collaboration between MSI members and academics, and also just facilitate the knowledge sharing, and also just explore the new methods and solutions proposed to the field. So in the past few months, we had some very productive conversations with our MSI members, and we learned what's their use cases, and what are the concerns and challenges they are facing right now, and what suggestions they have for the next phase they have for this initiative. Some of you are taking pictures. And a few of us from academic side are also involved in this initiative. So we would be really happy to chat with you about your interest to join this initiative, and also any questions you want to share with us. So having said that, I want to just pass it to Ali to talk about the next steps of our initiative, and we will really appreciate your feedback.
Thanks, Alice. So my first exposure to MMM models was when I was young and thought I could do anything, especially if it involved numbers. And I was working on an MM project, which for a brand that actually was on that slide a few slides ago. And we were the vendor for them, and project seemed to be going well, until the other analyst called me up and said, Ellie, if I change one little econometric assumption, I can switch the signs on the elasticities.
Okay.
That means, to translate, we can give the client any answer they want. And so I've always kind of stayed away from MMMs. Like Alice and Zhao, I've worked with individual level data where it's much harder to do that. But for the reasons Alice explained, we need to take a second look at MMMs. And so when I found out about this initiative, I got super excited about it because I know that out there in the world, there's a lot of variation in the quality of MMMs that are happening in the world today or X number of years ago when I was young and thought I could do anything. So my goal with being involved in this is to help lift the whole industry up so that people who are buying ads, people who are selling ads, can all sort of work together to have good measurement for ads. That's why I'm here. I think that's why the initiative is here too. So we divided the project up into 3 phases. So we spent some time thinking about like what is current MMM practice. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And we're just at the transition to trying to actually establish what makes for a good MMM. And I wouldn't even say a good MMM like a model, but a model pipeline, a whole flow, the data, the modeling, how the decision makers use that information. So we would like to establish sort of a set of guidelines of this is what a good MMM is versus what isn't a good MMM. And MSI is sort of perfectly positioned to do that because I am no longer an analyst at a vendor and I'm not selling anything. I just want to set good standards. And I'll talk a little bit. In phase 3, what we want to do is create an actual certification process that you could go through to have, the seal of approval that your MMM pipeline is totally solid. So let me give you some of what happened in phase 1. I can tell you a little bit, but it's sort of boring. We had a lot of meetings. Who did we have the meetings with? Well, we formed those panels, and there was an announcement at the 2023 MSI annual meeting that we were going to do this. That brought in more industry partners. And then a subgroup of the academics actually had one-on-one interviews. So I went and talked to someone at company X about what is your MMM pipeline? What does that look like? What are the issues? Based on those interviews, we wrote a white paper, which I think is available, right, John?
It's still in draft format.
Oh, there's a draft white paper. I'll hook you up. So the draft white paper will tell you kind of what we see as the scope of the initiative. Then we had a joint meeting, like a giant Zoom call, where we actually had people vote on priorities and what are the issues that are going on in MMM that we want to focus on. One of the outputs, one of the pieces of the white paper was that Mike Hansens, who's been involved in the project, kind of defined we need to talk about who the who's are in all of this. So I thought this was a helpful framework. So we're going to call data providers are people who provide the data to estimate MMMs. We have one of them sitting back from Meta, who's going to be talking to you a little bit tomorrow. So those are the companies that provide the data that feed these pipelines. Then there are the designers that design and build the MM models, like me and my partner analyst, some better than others at that. And then there are the users, like the team. Usually the large advertiser has a marketing team that kind of owns the MMM within the organization. They're the users, and they basically help the company evaluate and optimize marketing spend across channels based on these models. And then the group we're calling investors, those are the decision makers that ultimately make the marketing allocation decisions. Investors because they're investing in advertising. And those people don't usually know very much about MMMs. And they're an important stakeholder in this whole process, because if we get to here and these people don't understand, then it was a big waste of time. We also generated roughly this list of, I think there's a few more things that I cut off so that I could fit it all on one slide, what people are working on today in the MMM space. So you can see there's a bunch of stuff related to data for the reasons that Alice explained. The data is changing, and so we need to think about the data again. But there's lots of issues related to data. So is the data accurate is a basic question that people out in industry are worried about, that academics, we never were like, oh, well, the data's the data. But no, the data could be of varying accuracy. How often does the data come? What is the frequency? What is the latency? I talked to one advertiser who said, our latency when I started here was 6 months from the time we receive data to when we have a working model used to make decision making. And they had a huge initiative to tighten that up to like 3 weeks so that the data's fresh. How granular is the data across geography, across time, across marketing channels? We also have to adjust to changes in ad tech. So, new channels are being launched, and we have to figure out how to get those new channels into the models. Sometimes there's just no variation in the data, and if you're not a statistician, this is evil. Like, no variation in the data means you can't estimate anything. So that's a very bad thing. And there's all kinds of new data sources like sentiment, measures of the creative quality, media attention measures, are people actually looking at these ads? So all that under data. We also have a lot of teams now that are working on actually optimizing the marketing spending, like algorithmically coming up with an optimal marketing spend based on their MMM. And if you want to break a statistical model, wrap an optimizer around it. You will break it. I learned that like designing jet engines, actually. But anyway, it's same is true for marketing models. Optimizing marketing spend you will learn the weaknesses in your statistical model. One of the things that Mike Hansen's has been pointing out is there's also some misconceptions. So there are diminishing returns to advertising. So if you try to maximize the total ROI for a channel, you will try to use as little of that channel as possible so you get the best customers with the best targeting. And so you don't want to do that. You don't want to make that number as high as it can be. What you want to do is equalize the marginal ROIs across channels. So just getting that straight. And you can see we have on here training investors to use MMMs. How do we get them to actually affect decision making? We actually voted in the large group meeting, and the panel's big interests are on this geographic granularity and how to do the optimization. So I'm just reporting facts here. That's what they were interested in. Why are they so interested in granularity? One of our participants is Ross Link, who is from a company called Marketing Attribution. He shared with us a study he had done on how biased those elasticities can be if you have coarsened data. So as you get data that's not as granular, you can actually create biases in these elasticities. And so that is going to be one of the focus areas going forward, because everyone on that panel thinks it's important, and also we have some hard facts that it's clearly an important thing to think about. So that's my kind of summary of what happened in phase one. Now let's talk about phase two. Phase two, the goal of phase two is to establish some standards for the industry. And so we're thinking, we're still ideating. There's time for you to get involved and help form our ideas. But what we're thinking is to create some kind of a scorecard, which can be used for self-evaluation. Just a list of things you should think about when you're building your MMM pipeline. And we may actually ask people to share their self-evaluation so that we can provide that information back kind of in an aggregated form to say X% of MMM pipelines have this feature, or some don't have this feature, or whatever. So there are things like, how do you validate the accuracy of the data? Or do you? How geographically granular is the data? How channel granular is the data? All those kind of data sorts of things. Then there's some modeling things, and this is where I think the academics have kind of fairly strong opinions maybe. But we'd like to say the model really should incorporate some kind of assumption of diminishing returns to advertising. The model needs to make some reasonable assumptions about how the effective ads spread out over time. That's called time decay. And we're very, very good as academics at picking on each other. Did you know that? It's like half of my job is picking on other academics. They send me their paper, I read the paper, I say what needs to be better. So we're actually very, very good at validation, because we basically do that all day long. In this setting, that means things like we have a regular re-estimation cadence. We don't build this thing once, we re-estimate it regularly. We have some sort of validation, perhaps by simulation data, which Jess is going to talk to you about one solution for validation by simulation. You have some sort of out-of-sample validation, where you make predictions for the future and see if you get them right. And possibly some sort of validation where you take your elasticities and you compare them to other people's elasticities and make sure you're not like totally different than everybody else, because ads are basically communicating to people. It should all be kind of in the same ballpark. I mean, maybe your ads are great and much better than everybody else's, but they shouldn't be 10x. And then for the optimization, we would have another checklist of these are the things you need to think about when you're building the optimization capability. Does that make sense, kind of the idea? So we're building that. We want you to join us to help us build it. Like, the more people get involved in this, the more opportunity we have to really lift the whole industry up. Another thing we are thinking about, I'm a little bit speaking out of school. The whole panel hasn't agreed to this yet, but I wanted to throw this idea out there for you, which is we could actually ask companies to provide coarsened level elasticities. So I could get that data and then aggregate it up so that all of you don't see each other's elasticities. And then we can say these are the range of elasticities that we're seeing reported from among members. That's the idea. A little scary, right? Because we're going to start to share a little bit. But it could actually be really useful. Like I said, you shouldn't expect to be exactly the same as everybody else, but you shouldn't be 10 times. And if everybody's getting positive elasticities, your elasticities definitely should not be negative. And so that might help sort of provide some guardrails to these things by benchmarking across each other. So those are our two sort of phase 2 ideas, but it's a little bit evolving. We're trying to figure out what is the best way that we can like communicate to the industry that this is the bar, these are the standards. Once we do that, which we'll do over the next months, we would like to create a certification process where companies that participate wouldn't just do the self-evaluation, but they would actually have some people from the panel come peer review each other's MMM pipeline. So imagine I sit down and your analyst team presents to me over, like, maybe we do this over an afternoon. They show me all the pieces and I ask questions and I toss out penalty flags and say, that could be better. That could be better. And then we make a list of the things that could be better. And you also get this blue ribbon. Why is the blue ribbon important? There are going to be blue ribbons. There's going to be blue ribbons, right, Tom? There's going to be blue ribbons.
Yes.
I will make them in my basement with my hot glue gun. There's going to be blue ribbons. Why are there blue ribbons? Help build confidence with the investors. Right? The investors want to know that it's not just like this random guy who works for the CMO who told me I should spend more on ads. That sounds sketchy. But this guy who works for or gal who works for the CMO worked with a team that certified that this is a good MMM pipeline, and I should then use it. So it helps build confidence in that fourth stakeholder group. That's really important. There's nothing worse than being an analyst at a company and having your analysis go on a shelf and not affect decision making. Can you tell that I was an analyst at General Motors in the 1990s? It was sad. But anyway, back to the MMM project. So that is a real fuzzy thing, but hopefully I've conveyed what the goal is to get to. So I encourage you all to get involved. Any MSI member can join the MMM initiative. I think it's going to be a really rewarding process to work together on this. You'll get to meet other companies that are similarly interested in these problems. And it would be, to be clear, all 4 stakeholder groups will be represented on the panel. So there will be data providers, there will be vendors, there will be large client companies, all of the above, sort of working together to sort of establish the bar. You'll get to meet academics who are very interested in innovation. I'm interested in what's like the next thing we're going to do with MMMs. If you want to talk about experiments in MMMs and putting those together, I'm your girl. I would love to talk to you more about that. And then, there could be this opportunity to benchmark your advertising performance against other folks' advertising performance. So that's it. Alex and I would be happy to take questions. We also have sort of ringers on the line. So Carl Mella and Mike Hansons, who are also involved in the initiative but couldn't be here today, are on the Zoom call, and happy to take your questions about the whole idea.